Mobile hunters, are you looking to make the move to saddle hunting this year? Or maybe you just want to add a few new pieces of gear or upgrade your current saddle gear? If that's the case, then head over to tetherednation.com where they've got all mobile hunters covered. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old timer, Tethered is your one-stop saddle shop. From saddles to ropes, sticks, ascenders, whatever it is you need, they have you covered. I've personally been using their gear for the past 3 seasons now. My base setup consists of the Phantom saddle and the Predator platform. And if you're wondering why I've chosen to use their gear above all else, here's the cliff notes. They're innovative and pushing the mobile hunting forward overall. They cut no corners and prioritize the safety and performance of their gear. They care about the community that they've created, and their gear allows me to hunt free. And above all else, I like to support good people doing good work. If you're interested in upping your mobile hunting game, then head to tetherednation.com. This podcast is brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. Skull Brew Coffee roasts premium single origin coffee, guaranteeing to deliver the freshest coffee directly to your doorstep. The kicker, they're 2% for conservation certified and donate 10% of their proceeds back to organizations who support the interests of our hunting community. So go to skullbrewcoffee.com and pick up one of their 3-killer roasts and fuel your hunt and fill more tags with Skull Brew Coffee. Welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 214. Today I'm joined by my buddy Byron Horton of the Whitetail Experience, and we're talking all things mobile hunting. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. The season here in Pennsylvania has finally come to an end yesterday as of recording this on a Sunday, this up front. So Saturday, the 23rd, was the last day here in my general area to be out in the timber. And I did take advantage of it and get out and hunt the hunt the afternoon. The shoulder was feeling all right to get out, so that was kind of nice. No deer. It was a spot that I had not hunted at all this year. It typically doesn't get gun hunted. It's actually just a little sliver of public that's in between some houses and stuff, and it's you can't gun hunt it. So I slipped in there, expecting maybe there would be some deer hold up in there, but that was not the case. So it was really just kind of a flyer. I hadn't been in there all year. Knew it probably didn't have a ton of pressure. The downside of it is that it's not really close to food, and this time of year it's near kind of a swampy area. There's pockets of greenbrier that are in there, and that's kind of what I was banking on, because there's really no significant kind of food source around. It was windy yesterday, cold. I was expecting maybe the deer would get up and have to move, but that place was a ghost town. One of the reasons why I haven't hunted it a whole lot in recent past, or in this, really this past year, was, a lot of times I'm hunting it on Saturdays, just because that's when I can get out and hunt, being a working guy. And, occasionally I would get out in the mornings maybe and hunt it as it got close to, the end of October and so forth. But it's close to some houses, and there's one particular guy who kind of, his property neighbors at that piece, who almost like clockwork at like 4:30, like around 4:30, he'll walk his dogs, and there's like kind of this trail that he has that's from his house going down through the timber. And so what I've tried to do typically is like either hunt it during the week, like in the morning or something like that, which I've done in the past. Or if I am going to hunt it, I try to hunt it on days that aren't going to be great weather days, because he won't walk through, at least for evening hunts. So yesterday I was thinking it was windy enough, it was cold enough, it would probably keep that older gentleman out of the timber from walking his dogs. But as fate would have it, he walked through at about 4:00 with his 2 dogs. One of them got lost in the brush. He spent some time standing about 50, 60 yards from me yelling for his dog. So at that point, the hunt was kind of blown up, and that was an anticlimactic kind of close to my to my bow hunting this year. But with that, I'm actually really stoked to kind of get on scouting for this season. I got some really, what I hope to be some really cool, good opportunities that potentially will have some decent deer on it. I'm headed to some different areas this year, some different pieces of public that are a little bit bigger, more mountain kind of terrain. So for me, I'm headed north, be up toward the Poconos. Won't dive into what pieces, because quite honestly, I don't know what pieces quite yet. I'm kind of looking at a bunch of different places, but the goal is to get out there in the next few weeks and start doing that. Take the trailer with me, load the dog up, spend some, long weekends there, stay overnight, because it is a little bit of a drive from my house. And I'm going to probably put out a ton of cameras in that general area, in those spots, and monitor it from afar. This season, for the most part, may end up hunting it a little bit, but really trying to use cameras in that particular area to do the work for me, and to make plans for future seasons. A buddy of mine, Wilson, been on the show. He's hunted one or two of these general areas in the past. Just so happened he ended up hunting close to some pins that I had dropped to want to check out. So he and I are going to do our due diligence and go start to check some of that stuff out. But with that, I'm not going to lengthen this up front any longer than it needs to be. I will make quick mention. Head to my Instagram profile. Check out the link in the bio if you'd like to check out any Truth from the Stand merch. Have sweatshirts, shirts, coffee mugs, a bunch of cool stuff there. And then be sure to head over to skullbrewcoffee.com, especially if you're headed out to do some scouting. We have some kind of travel or mobile coffee, pour over coffee, if you will. That's at skullbrewcoffee.com. But for today, what we have going on is my buddy Byron Horton from the Whitetail Experience is on. Byron's from Ohio, hunting a lot of hill country, big woods, mobile hunter, aggressive hunter. He's a fellow that I've known for a while. We've kind of conversed back and forth online. Very similar style of hunting as I like to take. He probably falls more along the lines of the DeQuisto tree, if you will, of approach, which, we've had Cody on the show before, and I've definitely taken things from Cody. And what we really talk about today is just his mobile hunting style and how he kind of got into mobile hunting. We talk a little bit about the learning curve, and I've talked about this with, Dan Enfald about just, the learning curve for that mobile kind of aggressive style hunting. And, it does take some time to kind of to understand and get it to kind of to work for you. And you probably have a lot of failures along the way. So we talk a little bit about that. We talk a little bit about, who some of his big influences have been in terms of, turning him on to mobile hunting, and who he gathers information from, as well as kind of his scouting process and what that looks like. So super cool show for you guys today. And as always, I want to thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I have on my buddy from the Buckeye State. I'm not sure I think you're an Ohio State fan, so it might not be a great day to be talking to you based on the Alabama game. But anyway, I got my buddy, Mr. Byron Horton, on from the Whitetail Experience. What's going on, brother?
Hey, man, thanks for having me on. I appreciate that. Yeah, Buckeyes with a tough one last night, but that's all right. We're here to talk deer, not football, right?
I know. Well, man, my Steelers didn't look much better over the weekend, so I got zero football to be talking about right now. So, so we will definitely just dive into deer, man. But hey, dude, I appreciate you making time to come on. It feels like a long time coming. Like we've run in. It's crazy because we run in so many similar circles, and we've traded messages on Instagram, and I've followed your seasons and stuff like that, and followed the deer that you've killed, and we've traded messages back and forth, and just. I can't believe it's taken us this long to actually get together and actually do a podcast. So I'm glad we could actually finally make it happen.
Absolutely, man. And I distinctly remember discovering your podcast and really watching it just like evolve and you kind of took on the DIY crowd and I really have enjoyed the last couple of years of listening to guys you have on and you as a podcaster pulling information from them that has helped me or something that I can take to the woods. So yeah, man, excited to be on.
Yeah, awesome, man. I appreciate that, man. So first off, man, let's just jump into it, dude, because I'm jonesing to talk some deer hunting. I've had enough like adulting lately with doctor's appointments and shoulders and all that stuff. It's like it's feeling good just to talk some deer. So before we jump into all of that, give me a little bit of background about yourself. Where you're from, what you do for a living, just so the folks out there kind of know a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and the day job is I work in the accounting finance world, and as far as some of the other stuff I get into, obviously with I do some photo video work for the DeQuistos with Lone Wolf Custom Gear and XOP. I do some editing for the Whitetail Addictions web show, and then obviously the Whitetail Experience YouTube channel and kind of social media platform there. And, I kind of have an athletic background. I played college soccer, and right after that is kind of when I cannonballed hard into the whitetail world. Always been fascinated with deer hunting, even though I got a late start. But that's now that's everything to me at this point. I don't have much extracurricular activities besides really a little bit of workout and whitetails.
Yeah, man, I hear you. I'm in the same boat. And you're a relatively new dad, right? That's add that to the resume.
That is true. Yeah, figuring that one out. That's for sure.
Yeah, man. And so I'm always curious, man. Like how much different was it for your hunting season? Like, because you always kind of like think about it, right? And you're like, well, how's it going to change? You're like, I'll have to prioritize this and do this, and it'll, what was the delta between what you thought it was going to be like trying to make it through a hunting season with like now especially a young baby, versus
Hmm.
versus how it actually went. What was that delta like?
Yeah, so it definitely, you have to find all the new efficiencies and the new hacks. Um, I hit a home run with scheduling the pumpkin patch weekend there, like October 8th ish on a warm front.
Right.
And I'll be honest, we did have a hiccup. I bought an Illinois tag and it was only there for about 48 hours.
Hmm.
And the wife said, if you're going to continue to hunt, because I punched my Ohio tag a little bit early this year. I think it was like October 20th.
Hmm.
And we had to have a conversation that she really needed me there in the evening hours. And so I elected to get up at midnight some nights and drive to Kentucky and hunt like till noon down there,
Hmm.
and then drive home and be home 3 or 4 o'clock. So it's an adjusting period, and I'm still trying to figure all that out. But that is, yeah, there's a whole new set of things I have to account for now.
Right. It was, I forget, Troy Spooner, I think I had on, and he had a really interesting take because we talked about, he actually works in the finance kind of realm too, which is kind of interesting. But he was talking about whenever he made that transition, started having, started his family essentially, and it actually put an increased focus on the time he did spend in the woods to where it's like he became much more strategic. Like he was still doing plenty of scouting and stuff like that, but like when he was going out to kill, and he was doing it on prime days, and he was putting all the puzzle pieces together before he was going, because he's like, I might only get 2 days in like the next 3 weeks to be out. So I have to make it count.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Did you find a similar thing where you were really trying to like tighten down the screws even more so than previously?
Um, it was more just understanding the importance of when I did get time. In fact, like another thing I did this year that I've never done in the past was I was pulling trail camera cards at like 5 a.m. before the sun would get up. I might not even hunt that day,
Mm-hmm.
but I could pull a card or two and then be driving back. And with COVID, I had to start my day job at 9 o'clock.
Right.
So it's literally just about finding those most little quick efficiencies. I feel like to get all the scouting in, because I'm still in the evolution stage, I feel like, of the craft.
Right.
So yeah, like I think that's my learning curve right now, is finding those max efficiencies for max boot to ground time away.
Yeah.
When you can.
Yeah, exactly, man. I think we're all still in that learning curve phase of, development, if you will. That's kind of my opinion, man. I think that's the one commonality, and I know you get to spend some time with Cody and those guys. And even whenever I talk with him or Andre or whomever, the one kind of red thread that I see with, all these dudes, is that it's just this insatiable kind of thirst for learning the next thing. Like they never think they know it all. Right. And that was,
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was out at the Iowa Deer Classic the one year, and it was the first time I met Andre in person, and I got a chance to talk to him a little bit, and we were BSing, and we were talking deer hunting, and he was listening to me as intently as I was listening to him. And that was the thing that kind of struck me. It's like, man, that guy and guys like that are always looking for the edge, like anything. Like, and they look for it from anywhere. Like brand new hunter, don't care. He might be looking at something completely differently because he has zero experiences, right? And I might be missing the forest through the trees. And that's the one thing I've always kind of picked up on guys that like do it at a high level, is that, man, they're humble about it. They know that they have some skills, but they're just humble in the fact that they know that there's always more to learn if they want to kind of continue to push the envelope.
Exactly. Yeah, I would definitely say that's a trend. And a buddy of mine, Justin Hollinsworth, says, it's not so. Don't get me wrong. The last deer you killed is a good story and a good time, but I'm also really focused on the next deer. And when he said that kind of echoed with me. because he comes from one of those lines of big buck killers for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a straight savage, man. It's like I've watched some of his stuff. I've listened to him, and he's definitely one of those guys where he leaves no stone unturned. But with that, man, how did you get started hunting, dude? Like, cause I remember you mentioned, you played some college soccer, and then, that was about the time you really kind of jumped in like head over heels into the whitetail game. So how did you get started hunting?
Yeah, so I had my best friend in high school. His dad had a good piece of property out in Coshocton County, and I had grown up. My cousins lived in the country, and I remember seeing deer run across their property. And I'd be like, "Did you guys see that?" And being all fired up,
Right.
and they really didn't think two cents of it. And several years later, Mr. Yager, owned the property, and my buddy Corey, he said, "You want to come to deer camp?" And I said, yeah, like, so I went down there, and they had a nice cabin, and he handed me like a hand-me-down overall set with, that was camo, like mafia gray washed out.
Yeah.
A shotgun. And, we hunted that weekend, and I saw a few deer and missed, I think 2 of them just cause I probably was just so fired up, but, that hooked me. And the next year it was, sitting on the ground a lot with a hand-me-down Horton crossbow, probably from the late 80s or 90s. And that was kind of the getting the ball rolling. And then if you kind of, fast forward a few years to college, obviously, like, your best friend from high school, he moves to a different town, or he's going to school somewhere else. So it was at that point I kind of had to figure it out on my own. And so that's when I kind of started hunting some public land, and, just trying to figure stuff out on my own. And I would say a lot of it came right after college, as far as kind of the real cannonball into I had found some online forums that were a little better, some local, like Ohio-based forums. And there you could pick the brains of guys that were, camping in on some of these public lands, or had, small tracts, and were killing really good bucks on small tracts of land. And so, like, I would message them and get phone numbers and call people, and that's when I really started hanging out with my best friend David Ebright, who kind of had some success early, like right after college, killing a couple good bucks on public land. And he kind of took me under his wing there for a few years, and showed me quite a bit as far as the full season approach, if you will.
Right.
But that's kind of the start, and the last couple of years have been awesome, really. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Clint.
No, I was just going to say, what do you remember most about those like early years? Like what are some of the things, like when you look back on, where, whether you look back on them fondly, or were they like, maybe seminal moments of where, not that the bug bit you, but that you didn't maybe quite know what you were seeing, but you were starting to be able to tell, like, some things were starting to make sense, if you will. Were there any kind of like moments like that where you were like, okay, I get it now, or I saw this and now that makes more sense?
Yeah, it was funny. It actually comes on a squirrel hunt.
Mine came on a turkey hunt, which is funny.
It's I was so ate up with just hunting in general that dude, I used to squirrel hunt a good amount, and rabbit hunt. I just wanted to be out there. And I was squirrel hunting a piece of public land, and kind of just sneaking along with a 22, found some acorns and some deer shit, and I was like, I know there's some squirrels in here because there was hickory trees, and so I was sitting there, and sure enough, I had a small 4-point step out at 35 yards out of a thicket, and I was like, no shit, there's deer here on public land. I mean, this is 10, 12 years ago. I didn't think at that time it was can you get on private land, and I had come from hunting private land. It was I thought deer on public land were like these magical unicorns,
exactly,
that were only way back in the big timber,
Yep.
So that was kind of the moment that I said, wait a minute. And I think it was either that year or the year after is when I bought my climber and kind of started actually really pursuing whitetails on public.
Right. And that's a good segue, man. Cause like the one thing I was curious about, cause similar to you, I was on a turkey hunt, and this was like I wasn't even bow hunting yet. I had never even picked up a bow at this point because I didn't start bow hunting until I was probably 30. Grew up hunting all my life, but my dad never really bow hunted much. He would hunt with a recurve, and I've mentioned this in the past, but he would really only hunt with a bow on really windy days or really wet days. That was it, because he would still hunt. I never hunted from an elevated platform in my life until I was in my 30s. We always ground
Mm-hmm.
hunted and still hunted, and so I was actually on a turkey hunt with some family, and I I mentioned this story before, so I can't tell any untruths here. I'll get caught. I was hungover from drinking too much bourbon the night before, and I went down and laid and was in the woods like early in the morning for it was a fall turkey hunt, and I passed out in the woods, and I woke up and there were deer chasing right around me, like within like 30 yards, and I'd never seen, growing up in Pennsylvania, high pressure state, I'd never seen deer actually move without being pushed or running for their lives. I'd never seen that before. And so I was talking to this old timer that's friends with my father-in-law, and I was like, man, I saw this happening in the woods. And, these deer were chasing each other. And, I didn't have anyone teaching me about rut or anything like that when I was growing up. We didn't have cable TV. So I'd never seen like a Drury video, like nothing. You know what I mean? Like I never saw any of that. Like it was all foreign to me. And so my father-in-law's buddy, who was a big bow hunter, like we just started talking, and he was explaining like the rut to me and stuff like that, and explaining how deer kind of work and how they behave and stuff different times of the year. And that was it. Like I was all in at that point. You know what I mean? I was like, it's because my big hook to it was the strategy. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, you mean I can do this strategically? It's like playing chess. I was like, I'm in, you know? Um, so that was kind of my introduction, man. But I'm curious for you, like when you when you started making that dive in, when did the mobile hunting kind of aspect of things kind of start to creep into your repertoire?
Sure. So obviously, when I started hunting public land, I was a college student, so I really couldn't afford the best gear or whatever, and I wasn't spending as much time scouting in the off season, and I had $100 Field and Stream climber. Um, Gosh, that thing alone kind of started it, getting me up off the ground, even though it was loud and it clanged and it was not user friendly at all. But I remember, I think it was the first hunt I took it out, and it was kind of near where I'd seen that deer while I was squirrel hunting, and I got about 12 foot off the ground, and nobody had told me to pitch, the bottom side of the bottom part of your platform upward because
Right.
of that tree taper. So I got about 12 foot off the ground and had a deer come by, about 8 yards, 20 minutes before closing time. I drew back. And then when I took my head away from the peak to check, I realized it was like a spike buck.
Hmm.
I was like, oh God. And it was like an 8-inch, like 2 8-inch spikes. Like you'd have had to burn your buck tag,
Right.
but came right by me. And my platform's leaning way down. And that was just such a cool moment. I actually ended up shooting a deer. 10 minutes later, I had a doe come by me, and I was like, holy, like I thought it was the craziest thing ever, because I really didn't think I was going to see anything. I thought, public land deer hunting was, I don't know. I'd only heard from a few hunting mentors that, it's so crowded that you don't see many deer. That was a moment that just like shook me. To this day, I think that was kind of, wow, if you put in a little scouting, because I had the squirrel scouting from the season before that I'd seen deer come out of this thicket,
Right.
into this more open hardwoods. That it was just, the puzzle pieces of a better deer hunter were starting to fall in play.
Right.
I think that hunt was I think it was opening day, and I was pretty pumped to go kill a deer first time, or first deer hunt on public land with that climber. And I was just jacked.
Nice, man. Like one thing, dude, I'm loving about this conversation already is just like I can hear how excited you are. Like even just remembering the story, right? And that to me is I don't know, man. Like to me, I was thinking this as I was driving back, knowing that you and I were gonna record tonight, and I was just thinking back on some hunts and stuff like that. And I think the one thing that I've always kind of appreciated about you was that it was in the like the memory building, the experience, should I say? I mean, it's in the Whitetail Experience. It's in the name, right? it's, you just kind of embrace the whole experience of it, and listening to you talk about a young buck come through, you know what I mean? And you still remember it that vividly, you know, and still get excited about it. Like I'm the same way. Like I tell people all the time, I'm like, man, when I see a doe walk in, like I get excited. I just get excited when I see deer. You know, I was like, I just
Yeah.
get that jacked up. I'm like, I was like, I hope I never lose that. I was like, because that's part of the part that I love, is that I have something that I get that excited about. Do you kind of feel the same way?
Oh, absolutely. Like even to this day, and it doesn't matter even if it's a doe out there or whatever. Like you hear twig snap and see like a leg move under some brush or whatever. Like you just kept it going. Like it is awesome. I even find myself now. Like the other day, I scouted the other morning, and I woke up at like 3 a.m. and didn't have an alarm set till 5, and I was kind of like, I'm pretty excited to get out there and put a little boots to ground and
Yeah,
see some new stuff. I'm
that's
just
it.
kind of ate up with it at this point.
That's it, man. Like, cause as weird as it might sound, and some people might think it's crazy, but I'm kind of like you, where it's, you know, uh, I I really look forward to scouting. Like that's actually like, I mean, I love the hunt. Don't get me wrong, but man, there's just something about going into an area and trying to find the puzzle pieces for the next year, or for the next deer, the next year, or whatever the case is. Like there's just something I really like about it, that I look forward to it, and it's like I have an anticipation for it, almost like I do for the anticipation of like the opening day. If you know what I mean. Do you kind of feel the same way? Do you get like that geeked up about it?
Yeah, I don't know if I get that. I don't know if I get that geeked up. Scouting season is. If you look at it as, I'm getting some exercise in. I'm covering some new ground. You kind of have that that anticipation of what next year could bring. Um, but yeah, I feel like that in season, you don't sit there and toss and turn about where you're going to walk the next day versus I got a northwest wind. I got 3 potential ambush points that may work for the buck I've been getting trail cam pics of, or I saw last week. I don't
Right.
know. I'd say I'd still lean towards in season. I'm a little more antsy.
Right. Maybe I'm just excited to use my new trailer. Maybe that's what it is this year. I'm just
That,
ready to go stay in that a little bit more. Um,
right. That's like a kid on Christmas playing with his new toy. The trailer's new. Like
yeah.
if you have a new piece of gear, for sure, you could definitely do that excited.
Yeah, that might be where it's coming from, because that's this year with the trailer. It's like I can really kind of, even around me locally or close-ish to me, I can start to expand my scouting now, because now I have somewhere I can stay for multiple days over a long weekend, and be able to cover enough territory to where it's not a waste of time to drive it out in one day and have to come back and only have one day on it. So I'm looking forward to that. And my dog is my road dog. I always take him scouting with me. He does great in the woods. And so he and I have some trips planned this year to go do some scouting, and I'm looking forward to spending some time with my best friend in the in the trailer, checking out some new public land. But what's so you got into public land, hunting, and you're into the mobile thing. And we were talking a little bit about this, offline before we started recording, because it's one of those things I think I probably get some questions about, whether it's on Instagram or wherever. And it's the focus of what we talk about a lot on this podcast. But, what was the hardest part for you, or the steepest learning curve of that mobile aggressive style of hunting? What was what was the part that was, the hardest part of the learning curve, and what was it that finally clicked that made it all start to kind of make sense and work for you?
Uh, so I think of a few things. One, I'll touch on just real quick. When I went from having that $100 Field and Stream climber, I remember I got my first better job, and all I saved up for with it was a tree walker climber, which was like 19 pounds, and it stacked kind of nice, and it had just a little better, and it was just a little better system.
Right.
So when I got that, the day in and out of hunting became significantly easier. So I found myself wanting to do that more.
Right.
But as far as like the learning curve to probably shooting better bucks on a more consistent basis was there's probably 2 things there, maybe 3. We'll see what we get to. But one would be kind of the year-round approach. So now that I had the gear to kind of mobile hunt, even if it was just a climber for a couple of years before I went to stay in sticks, It was having, a good grasp of a few pieces of public with a lot of pins on them, where I had put in the time in the off season scout. Because I think right after college, sure, I had a little better climber. I was ready to go, but I hadn't spent season after season putting on. Oh, the last couple of years, I averaged about 70 miles. Your buddy bow hunting fiend always crushes me by like 20.
I know, right? I know. I had a goal last year for myself to do like 100, and I don't think I got there. I think I got to like 60 or something like that, and that was it.
Yeah, and so that was probably one of the bigger learning curves is and being detail oriented in that, because I think part of, if you look at guys like Andy May, the DeQuistos, like they are all detail oriented in killing these higher caliber bucks. Even guys in say Michigan killing 100-inch bucks, if that's the top buck, they're detail oriented.
Right.
And so, like, yes, I have all these pins, but do I have the access routes mapped in there? Do I have maybe all the hub scrapes marked on them? It's not something that I built one off season. It took a few years, and then I would say kind of like I don't know if we're on bullet point 2 or 3, but like this is something I've noticed in the last couple of years that you do all this off season scouting and you mark like all these great trees and ambush points, but if I look at the last 3 bucks I've killed, it's all I have the blueprint, but I make a in season decision on where to strike.
Right.
And that came from scouting. That came from maybe a visual side. That came from 2 or 3 other things. But it's not falling in love with, oh, I'm going to kill the biggest buck on this piece of public at this stand location. You don't mark that essential. You may mark that stand in January, but I think it's something that I've tend to figure out in October, November, where I'm going to kill him.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense, man. That's interesting. I think, a couple things, man. I think the year-round approach that's the one thing I try to impress upon people. If they ask about the mobile/aggressive hunting style of stuff, I'm like, you got to love the process, or it's just not going to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bigger thing, and I really find that true regardless of whatever it is in life that you want to be good at or have success at. If you don't like the process, because the goal and the outcome and like the achievement is really fleeting. Like that's just a moment in time, right? It's the equivalent of a football player, right? You better love the process because the Super Bowl is just a day.
Exactly. You could be a good high school football player and maybe even a Division I player. We've seen guys win the Heisman at the college level and then not be able to crack it in the NFL.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because they get there and it's just like the work and the process is just too much. You know what I mean? It's just they don't have it in them to go the extra mile. So I do think that to me was like one of the big things for me too, was just making it a more of a year round approach. The 2 big things for me though, man, were probably the biggest one in all honesty was once I really kind of understood wind and thermals, it clicked. Because because I found over the years I was putting myself in right positions, but at the wrong times or in the wrong winds, or I wasn't giving the deer the wind enough, just not being confident enough to play the wind that sharply. So that was like a big learning curve for me. And then I'm sorry,
I would say thermals is definitely, I would agree. Thermals is another good point. If you hunt hill country and you rewind time 10 years ago, that wasn't really well known. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is too, is I think the cool point about us having this discussion is that we have a lot of the same folks that we've kind of learned from, you know what I mean? over the course of time. And this just kind of goes to prove it. Like there's not a framework to you. I shouldn't say a framework. There's not a lock, stock, and barrel approach to this. Everyone does it a little bit differently, and you have to do it a way that feels right for you and works for you. And so what one person focuses on and becomes like the linchpin for their approach may not be the linchpin for another person's approach. It's just about a framework to use of like, these are all the things you need to kind of consider. And the other thing for me, and this was big, was just more trusting and having confidence in my instincts whenever I was a reading sign to know that was the sign to set up on. that was a big thing for me, was like being able to trust myself. Cause I've walked by so many places that I should have set up on and just walked by because I was like, nah, that's probably not it. Or there's something better around the corner. And, fear of missing out got me, essentially. Do you kind of feel the same way? Was it a while until you started trusting yourself?
Yeah, and I think it takes a little bit of a skill set to recognize. And on one piece of public, hot sign may look a touch different
Yeah.
than another piece of public, or a piece in general, just depending on, I hunt some pieces where there are low deer numbers,
Yep.
versus, I've hunted some pieces that tend to have a lot of like 4 pointers, or maybe, 80-inch bucks. And so what is a lot of sign in that area could vary. And I think, yeah, I think that's a confidence thing. I think that just takes time to figure out.
Yeah, I think it's a great point you make, man, because I think a lot of people will walk in looking for sign and they kind of base it on whatever they're familiar with, whatever there is around their home, right? And especially if you start traveling out of state, it the sign's completely different. I know that there's one big woods piece that I hunt. Um, there's world class caliber animals in there, and we have them on camera, and you would swear fork horns are making the sign just because it's not big. You know what I mean? It's like you would never know that those caliber of deer are in that spot. Not in a million years based off the sign. So I think that that's a great point, is that you kind of have to contextualize the sign for where you're at and what's prevalent or what's common in that area. Um, I'm curious, man, because one of the things that has helped me a ton too was, I will go in blind to places pretty frequently and hunt. And this actually came from our mutual buddy, Greg Litzinger. He kind of pointed this out to me because he was like, you get on deer great when you're out of state and you're doing whatever. He is like, and you had good encounters this year in Pennsylvania. Um, he's like, but I feel like you freeze up in Pennsylvania because you almost have too much information and you're trying to kill deer at a specific spot. Going back to what you were saying, like you don't know where you're going to kill them until like October, November. Where whenever I go out of state and I don't scout a spot and I just hunt it and I'm basically freelance hunting it, reading signs, setting up, I hunt a lot more free and I'm just making decisions on the fly based on what I'm seeing. And whenever I'm hunting my home state, I kind of overanalyze things a little bit. I don't hunt quite as free. How often do you kind of go into a spot with like no information? Is that something you like to do, or do you usually like to kind of have a roadmap and a plan?
I would say I'm a roadmap and a plan. Assuming I'm here in the home state, chances are I know something maybe in there, or I'm scouting. I tend not to hunt just willy nilly anymore, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing so much more value into even walking, pulling trail cams, driving these roads, that's more valuable than me just throwing a dart. To me, I need a couple pieces of information. I'm not just going to go sit in Oak Flat to go sit in Oak Flat on October 5th.
Right. No, I totally agree with that.
And I would say I remember the conversation that kind of flipped that switch. It'd been a couple years ago, and I asked Cody, what are where are you going to be later this year? What are you going to, are you going to be hunting Illinois? And he just looked me dead in the eye and he said, I just kind of figure it out when the season's here.
Right.
And the thought of where is the buck, that the caliber you're after at, what is he doing that day?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of resonated with me, because here, in the last couple of years, I'd put all these pins all over on X, and I was like, oh yeah, I've got this doe bedding area, I've got this good pinch point, and a lot of my stuff is probably based around rut activity, just because I'm a working man. That's when I take my time. But
yep.
Honestly, you could hunt that best pinch on a given piece, and if there's no buck the caliber you're after, it doesn't matter if like 6 4-pointers cruise that pinch that day.
Right.
So I remember that conversation. I remember kind of taking it very serious and starting to apply it here in the last couple of years, and just really thinking in season scouting is number one.
Yeah. And honestly, man, that's why for me, when I go out of state to hunt, especially, which is why I need to try to maybe hunt more in state like I do out of state, is very much like that. I may not have, again, to your point, working guy, don't have a ton of time, especially if I'm going out of state. I may or may not get the opportunity to go scout it. Like this year in Missouri,
Mm-hmm.
I had no chance to go out and scout it. So every day was just walking the piece and figuring out where the deer were at. You know what I mean? And just reading the sign and figuring out where I need to set up based on what I was seeing, which
Yeah.
is just a really freeing feeling to do that. And it's a little nerve wracking too. You know what I mean? Because I remember similar conversation with Cody, and this kind of helped me with figuring out how to prioritize the sign whenever I was hunting like that without having an opportunity to scout an area, was that it's that confidence factor of like, if you don't think you're going to kill a deer there, then why you set up, And so there's been plenty
Yep.
of hunts where it's like, I just ended up walking the entire day and did not find one
Yeah.
thing that I wanted to set up on. Cause there was more value in me walking than there was sitting. You know what I mean?
And I will say, you can sometimes do some dart throws and do okay, especially on out of state hunts. Say it's a morning, you just got there, you want to hunt. You could dart throw on like a hogback or a good terrain shelf, a third of the way up. And if terrain will dictate movement, and, deer bucks tend to be moving a little more in the rut. Sure. Like I don't get me wrong, I've hunted out of state where you got to throw darts and then you can scout once the sun comes up or whatever.
Right.
I do that a little more out of state, at least as a starting point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally. Because it's almost a requirement just based on the familiarity with the piece potentially. Right. Cause I'm similar to you where, if I can have some information, I want it, and I'll prioritize scouting over hunting. And I think that's the one thing I've, over the years of doing this show and having the opportunity to talk to a bunch of, great dudes, is scout way more than you hunt. So even if I am going to go out of state and I'm going to kind of freestyle a hunt, I might spend the entire first 2 days scouting before I ever set up anywhere, and I'm just trying to learn what the hell's going on before I waste a bunch of hunts. But you're right. You can go and set up somewhere, especially during rut, and, get lucky essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But man, between you and I ain't that lucky. So that ain't happening for this guy. It's gonna be a grinder.
I passed a buck in Indiana on a dart throw that maybe I should have shot. And I know you talked a lot about this year being a ground scouter. It's funny, after that first trip in Indiana, I had a buck encounter on the ground, but Dave and I, my hunting partner, we compared notes, and it's like, dude, if we go out of state to a place we don't know, we said we're almost better off to at least spend half the time on the ground. And then this year in Kentucky, don't get me wrong, I threw some darts, but I think the two better bucks that I encountered, I think 3 bucks over kind of we'll call it 115 plus, were all encounters on the ground.
Yep.
And they wouldn't have happened if I'd have been in a stand, because I started the day in stand location A, and it's because I decided at 2 hours after daylight that I needed to go for a walkabout.
Yeah. No, 100%, man. It was similar for me. It was the first piece in Missouri was on the ground. I spent the whole first day scouting until the evening. So set up in between 2 cut bean fields, probably about with 2 hours of daylight left, just to set up and kind of observe. And we had some scrapes and some hammer rubs in that area that just looked like they were the best stuff we had found that day. There was one other area that we found that was pretty good, but I felt like it was more of a morning setup, and I didn't want to burn it that evening. And so we ended up going back in there the next morning on the ground, and that was where we had encounter with 3 different bucks that morning. Just couldn't get any of them to stop. They were all running. And then the last spot in Missouri about got run over by a big deer on the ground, and then ended up still hunting back up on him to 40 yards and just couldn't seal the deal on him. And those were both just, ran into deer because I was walking, and it was like, oh, here we go. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Like, we walked into them. This is where they're spending time. Let's hunt it. I think that's a big thing that people don't, I'm curious your answer to this, man. And again, I picked some of this stuff up from, whether it's Cody or whether it's some of the guys from THP or whatever. But sometimes if I'm on a new piece, especially if I'm on a new piece, I might just do a walkabout and see if I can't jump deer and try to learn just where the deer are at and not really care that I'm pushing them. Do you kind of feel similarly, or do you take a different approach?
I guess if it was a new piece, I'm not opposed to bumping deer and learning it. That does happen, but yeah, I'm not afraid to walk some and still hunt, especially when conditions allow for it.
Right.
I listened to or watched a lot of Zach's stuff, especially when he's in Ohio.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but you know, they ran into situations where they had really dry leaves and it hadn't rained in a couple weeks. And they kind of morphed to their normal walkabouts to more of a still hunt and more of a stump sitting game, really.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not opposed to bumping deer, but I'm also like, if conditions are best for still hunting, let's walk for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Again, I think, the moral of the story here is a lot of this stuff is contextual, right? You got to kind of roll with whatever what the day is going to give you. And that's from deer movement to, weather conditions, whatever the case is, you have to kind of take all that into consideration as you're, planning your approach. But man, I'm always curious with this question, for buddies of mine, and it's a conversation I'll have with like, Chad and those guys when we're sitting around camp or whatever, just kind of talking about it. But who are some of the folks early on that you were really kind of picking stuff up from when you really started kind of saying, hey, this mobile aggressive kind of game, public game is what I'm going to focus on. Like who were the people that you really kind of started, learning from early on? Then I would even go into like now, like who are the people that had the biggest impact on you?
Sure. I think number one was a guy off the Ohio Sportsman's Forum. So this is, we'll call it 2008-ish time frame. There's a couple guys on there one was Skinner or something. I don't know his name, but he would talk about hunting some bigwood stuff, and he would just kind of document his adventures, and that guy was on, he'd say he'd see a couple 140s and 160s every year, and I was like, oh my god, like a
Right.
public. And so that guy right there was a huge asset to my learning. Obviously, in fault, a lot of that free information that he put
Mhm.
out on YouTube, the Hill Country Bucks DVDs, the old ones
Yeah.
with Jared Aerodati, who put those together. And I actually now have his number in my phone, but that guy, that DVD changed my life. I can remember I would drive down to Dave's house on Tuesdays because that seemed to be the best day for. We didn't have a lot going on. We this is early 20s. That was Deer and Beer Tuesday.
It sounds like a good time to me, man.
Yeah, and we would watch that thing on repeat, and be drinking Busch lattes and pulling up maps, and I would throw Dave's name in this list as far as guys that I was listening to, because he had figured some of the scouting type approach out early. I'm trying to think. Obviously, Andy May, once he started doing a lot more podcasts, that's a guy I listen to. I
Mhm.
think Kenyon too.
Yeah.
He was the first whitetail podcast or the first bigger audience.
Right.
I always had good takeaways. Heath Cisco, I talk to selfishly and ask a lot of selfish questions because he can. I can disclose where I am, and he kind of knows the areas or whatever a little better because he's from my neck of the woods.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I think that's a good list of guys and obviously Cody and Andre and Cody in particular, because I mean he's done a lot for me from just all the time we spend together. I even though we're hunting inches apart in deer, I'm kind of looking for a 130 plus, and obviously he's looking for a mega giant.
Right.
But it's probably, you could look at it as he's looking for the top buck on a couple of his farms, and I'm kind of looking for a top caliber buck on the places that I'm after. And so I can just kind of morph that into what I'm doing.
Right.
And so yeah, that's been something. The hunting low concept from him is something that I've taken and really run with here lately.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's always, I was interested when he and I talked about, I think it might've been at the Iowa Deer Classic when we were hanging out, that we talked about that a little bit. And that's something I always kind of did almost out of like, I don't know. I never felt like I needed to climb any higher than to first cover. Like that was always kind of my approach, right? It was like, I'm just going to climb till I get cover. And then once I get cover, like I'm good. Like, why would I climb any higher? Is that kind of like your approach? Is that why like you hunting lower, or is there a different reason behind
Well, I definitely think he had to talk me into it, because but I will say from like when I was in college, I watched a lot of outdoor television in the one dorm that had a cable package with it. I'd like swipe in or whatever and watch, the Lee and Tiffany's, the Drurys. And so I was kind of tricked,
right?
because what those guys were doing is nowhere near what I do to get on a higher caliber buck. And so, most of those shows, you got you got a cameraman and a guy and sitting on the edge of a food plot, and they're like 25, 35 foot up.
Yeah.
And even when I had the climber, the climber, if you got a telephone pole tree, you set the pitch as steep as you can get it 6 foot off the ground and kind of chin up into them. You can go as high as you want or you can go really high. I don't know if you can go as high as you want, but you can get up there in those climbers for sure. And even stand sticks, I was always wanting to get high. And I don't think that was really until 2018 that I felt comfortable, after Cody was saying, yeah, I take 2 sticks and a couple screw ins, and that's kind of my mobile setup. This is, he was running 2 XOP long sticks, but he said that's what he wanted. He didn't hunt high, and I thought he was crazy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I wound up killing a buck that year, 2 sticks and two steps high. And I was like, oh shit, it worked.
Right. Right.
And then 2019, I remember I was going for a hunt in a thicket, and I told Dave, I was like, man, I'm going to be 1 stick high. I'm going to shoot him, 5 yards, like whitetail adrenaline down the collarbone. Like there's a couple trails that converge. And he goes, you need to get back to hunting up in trees like you've been doing for years and killing good bucks, blah, blah, blah. Well, I went out that day and I had 3 bucks under 20 yards. Some of them 4 to 6 yards away from the tree, and one was like a 120er.
Nice.
So yeah, just confidence after hunting low quite a few times. And that's actually how I killed my buck this year, was literally like 3 foot off the ground. So
nice. Yeah. I think the lowest I ever killed one was, I think, roughly 10 foot was probably the lowest I've ever been to kill him. But I don't really ever climb much higher than that. I mean, I use 2 sticks and a 5-step climbinator, and I can probably max out at like 17 foot, at platform height, but most of my sets are probably 14 feet. You know what I mean? 13 feet is probably most of the time roughly where I'm at. Now I'm always concealed. I'm either like in the crotch of a tree, or I've got a ton of back cover, or whatever the case is. I'm not going to sit myself out there to be silhouetted or whatever. But yeah, man, I think it's interesting you said being tricked, because that was the one thing, like, when you consuming hunting media, especially through like the 90s and maybe in the early aughts, it was really easy to kind of get fooled into, you need this latest thing or that latest thing or whatever the case is. What I love about now is that there's so much free information out there that's really accessible that, I feel like less and less people are being tricked. Maybe. Do you feel the same way, or do you still feel I think there's still people who want to be tricked. I think there's 2 crowds. I think there are those that want to be tricked because they want the easy way, right? They want the magic bullet. And then there's those that really just want to know what actually works and to not be tricked. Do you kind of feel the same way?
Yeah, I think if somebody's wanting to elevate their whitetail game, it's much better these days. I used to think products killed deer. I used to think, tossing a scent bomb out there was going to bring me every 150 in the county.
Right.
I thought I needed to shoot this bow with this broadhead. Yeah, I definitely think now, if you're a guy hunting North PA Big Woods, you can find a web show, you can find a podcast that targets that guy. Or if you want to hunt the South, the Florida crowd, the Georgia crowd, there are podcasts, there are web shows, there are specifically dialed in content that show just how those guys are getting it done. Or you can listen to podcasts of guys killing good bucks in that area. I think if you're an eager consumer, it's a way better time, and the learning curve is so much faster now. You see it now, guys that can just kind of pick it up at a lot quicker rate.
Yeah, I have a buddy of mine around here, man. He actually makes me mad once in a while because he's he started hunting waterfowl. His name's Wilson. I've had him on the podcast a bunch, and
Yeah.
he started hunting like waterfowl, and then he moved to Pennsylvania because he's originally from Washington, and he moved here and he started deer hunting. He's only been really deer hunting for whatever it is at this point, 4 or 5 years, something like that. And he's one of those guys that is just a sponge. Like as soon as he hears like a tactic, a strategy, or whatever, he will be in the woods the next 3 days doing it, and then figuring out how it works for him. And so I'm always so amazed by his learning curve and how quickly he picks stuff up. Like things that took me a couple years of doing it and screwing it up, like he picks it up in like a season, and then it becomes like a thing that he uses going forward and has success with. And I'm like, man, it took me like 2 years to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we talked about it early in this show, thermals, right?
Yep.
I hunted for 6-7 years in Ohio, and some of that being hill country. Nobody mentioned thermals. Nobody talked about thermals. I guarantee you, if you scrolled through a couple of the Facebook forum groups tonight, you would see somebody talking about thermals.
Right. Exactly.
And what would that do to your hunting, Clint, if you knew exactly, or somebody said, hey, grab some milkweed and use it all season to see what's going on in your timber, what that would have done for you 10 years ago.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know. It would have made a world of difference.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Like my brand, the Whitetail Experience, I get a decent amount of DMs, questions, stuff like that. I literally am targeting myself at 19 years old. A kid ate up with deer hunting, like cutting pictures out of field and stream of giant bucks, putting them all on my wall, wanting to kill them, but having no idea how to do it.
Right.
We used to hunt this 100-acre tract in a good county, and we didn't play the wind. We literally just hunt the same 8-10 stands every morning, every evening. And we noticed, October 15th, we had a lot of deer. And by December 1, we hardly had any deer running around the place. No rhyme or reason. And that's just, that was what I was doing.
Right.
And, the information today is a guy can get dangerous quick if he really wants to.
That's a great way to put it, man. A guy could get dangerous quick if he really wanted to. Speaking of, all that information that's out there, it's like the one thing that I think that I've seen as well, especially with maybe some folks that were kind of newer to the game or newer to hunting or whatever the case is their ability to learn how to scout more effectively, more quickly. Right. That's, I think, one of the things that I've kind of seen, especially, Onyx, great tool. Love it. Also, the reason why I go 1.5 miles, 2 miles back in and see someone put a tree stand up. You know what I mean? So it's good in one sense, because I love that it's getting people out and, and they're finding more success and stuff like that. But it also makes it, more challenging, and you have to be a little bit more diligent whenever you're scouting because of those things. But with that in mind, what does your off-season scouting process look like, especially in your home state of Ohio? How do you kind of start breaking down a piece? We can even just take now, for example, we're at the end of the season pretty much. What are the things you're going to be doing next, and what are you going to be looking for?
Yeah. So if I look at my off season, I know with a kid and kind of my work schedule and what I got going on, I'm probably going to get a few less miles in, but so I have prioritized the pieces of public that I want to touch the most. And I think another big learning point in my bow hunting is I think early on might have tried to stretch myself too thin, where I was trying to be in like 8 counties and really try and but I didn't have those 8 counties I was spending time in. I didn't have those spots super dialed. And so going into this off season, I've got a handful of places I want to check out. I still have a few cameras to pull if I pray they're there. But, I know I'm going to be spending time, and I'm going to say under 6-ish pieces of public, maybe a few more, but I'm not going to be all over the place. I think, when I go out for a walk, I'm a big proponent. Like, even if you only have 2 hours now this weekend, you don't wait around for the weekend that you got 6 hours, because that may not come until March. And think about all that time you could waste.
Right.
Heck, you may roll your ankle in 2 weeks and then not be able to scout. So I'm a big proponent in kind of just that cumulative effort where, the other day I drove down and only scouted 3 hours, was home by noon, but it was already getting some stuff done that I wanted to do. And it was my highest, priority spot to go to. So I think that's something that should be noted there, is
Right.
prioritizing and consistently attacking.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I like to get up early too when I go to these places, because sometimes you can catch some deer on the roads, or kind of get a small glassing session in right before you hit the timber. I like to get up early and get a move on.
Right. I mean,
I
that
pack
makes
my
sense.
lunch.
That makes sense, man. Because how many times, at that time of year, it's like you don't mind running into deer during gray light. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
actually, it's like when you're scouting, it's like might even be to your benefit to run into them, during gray light, or when they're almost back to bed or whatever. Or you can look at the map and see, well, I met them here. Where's the next logical bedding place they're likely going to, and where were they probably coming from, and what terrain features are funneling them to these spots. You can
Yeah,
really start to backtrack some things.
yeah, even just seeing a deer in the headlights crossing roads and stuff is
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, a good piece to the puzzle. I've noted that before, and keyed in on a pretty good spot, because so much of some of the public doesn't hold whitetails,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's a double dip effect there if you can be there right at the morning and catch them, if you will.
Right.
Um,
One thing I actually picked up from Jeff Sturgis, I read one of his books like a while ago, that I still like think of this every day or every time I'm driving, like especially around any of the pieces that I'm hunting, and even when I'm going out of state, is I'll look for roadkill around the public and see where deer are crossing roads and where they're getting hit, because it's probably telling me that there's a reason that they're moving there. There's got to be some type of transition line there. There's got to be some type of hard edge. There's got to be some type of food, some type of bedding or something. There's a reason that they're crossing there. They're not doing it just because, you know. And that was one thing that I picked up from him was like, pay attention to where you're seeing roadkill, and then look at the habitat around there and understand why they're actually using that spot to move. Is there a low spot there? Is it pulling thermal so they can smell better? Like, there's a reason why, and just figure out that reason why, and it might actually help you understanding that piece or that section of that piece. I thought that was always kind of interesting.
That's solid. I'm a Sturgis fan. I don't think I've ever heard him. I'm not. Clint, you taught me something. This podcast is worth it now.
No, it was I don't know that he's ever mentioned it on a podcast or if he's ever mentioned it like on any of his videos. It was in one of his books that I read.
Okay.
And I don't remember which book it was because I've read a couple of his books. But it was probably about the time I was trying to flip the switch of really trying to understand, deer behavior more. And someone turned me on to Sturgis, and I knew they had a couple books out, and so I just started reading a bunch of his stuff. And that was the one thing, because I was like, that takes no effort. I was like, I can do that whenever I'm driving down the turnpike along a piece of public land and just start looking, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I actually actively do that whenever I'm around a spot that I know that I want to hunt. If I see roadkill, I'll take note of it. I might even stop and pull off alongside the road and pull up my map and look and try to figure out like, okay, where was this thing coming from? Why did it get hit here? Where's it going? So yeah, just a little, it's going back to that thing, man. All these guys that we know that, do it on a consistent basis. They leave no stone unturned, and that's just kind of like
Yeah.
another thing that I added to my pack of, it may never mean squat, and it may be the thing that helps me kill the biggest deer I've ever killed potentially,
Yeah, no, I'll take that and add it to the repertoire. I guarantee you, next time I see a carcass or something like that next to some public, I'm going to pull out the map and note it.
I told Jeff
sure.
one time, I was like, I've never looked at roadkill the same since I read that. I was like, honest to God. So how are you, I want to go back for 1 second. Cause you said, you'll start to qualify maybe 6 pieces, like priority pieces that you want to, prioritize so you're not wasting your time. How are you qualifying those pieces? What are you looking for in those pieces that tell you that's something you want to check out? And let's start from the point of maybe it's a new piece of public near you that you've never scouted before. What would tell you that, hey, I want to make this one of the ones I want to look at?
Yeah, I think best is real world example. I remember, I think it was 2017 going into the off season. I actually went and started scouting, I think late December, January, and deployed a camera and started walking. But like, I looked at this piece and I don't think this is any secret. You look for stuff that's away from high population densities.
Hmm.
You look at access point. Um, if you're really good, I'm sure you can dive into to cover and habitat. I'm not the best scouter on some of that, and sometimes even the clear cuts don't show necessarily on aerials. And so,
Hmm.
I don't spend too much time looking for necessarily cover and habitat on an aerial. But I do believe some of those big ticket items, getting away from people, getting away from access. That's I mean, I'm not saying anything new there.
Right.
Um, but boots to ground, and I remember that off season I added this piece, and one I pulled that late trail cam, and we just noted a decent amount of 2.5-year-olds and one slammer. But that's one slammer doesn't make or break. But we were like, oh, decent amount of 2.5-year-olds and a decent amount of doe activity in daylight,
Hmm.
um, late season, and so clearly those deer had survived the year and we're very it was one of those things that when I would put that camera out, I put some boots to ground in the area and just felt like I was finding a lot of buck sign and a lot of deer sign in general. So it wasn't necessarily one to two things, but I picked it out on those parameters. The trail cams really showed, and then obviously the boots to ground helped a ton. But you know as far as a new piece of public, I would think something that I do prioritize is time. I do have some weekday spots where I can't get to as much,
Hmm.
and sometimes that hunting's not as good.
Right.
I'm okay with driving a touch farther on weekends. I'm okay with getting up, half an hour earlier to get to some of those pieces.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
I think that's something I do probably a little better. Is doing what's hard.
Right.
Um, because we talked about the guys that won it. Johnny Stewart, dude, he's driving back from Iowa right now. I talked to him the other day.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll talk about I was like, man, how long you got? He goes, we got 8 hours left, but that's not that bad. It's just he's like, I wanted to come out here and find a good one, and it's just it's
Yeah.
part of the process. How bad do you want it?
Yep. Exactly. That's the one thing, man. You can control your effort, right? Whatever it is, hunting or not hunting, that's the one thing you always have control over is how much you want to put into it, and that's the thing. Like, the whole land game is not easy, and it's not for everyone necessarily. It is harder, right? It's like I've had family farms, and sure, it was easier going and having presets and stuff like that, and but
Mm-hmm.
but also the other part that was kind of restrictive was if the deer that I wanted to kill or the type of experience I wanted to have wasn't there, then I just didn't have the opportunity to have it. And that was really for me why I started kind of branching out and going and exploring, public, more specifically, because I was like, I can just roam. And if there's right deer isn't here, then I'm off to the next piece and I'm okay with that. I'll just go find one. Um, and so that's kind of how I've always kind of looked at it too. It's like, if you're willing to put the work in and put the boots to the ground and the miles, then, you'll eventually find success over time. It might take a little bit of time, but you'll narrow down your process and you'll figure it out. And I'm similar to you, man, where I'll do plenty of scouting, but and I'll kind of highlight some areas I want to hit, and I'll kind of cross off the obvious areas like you stated that I'm just not even going to pay attention to. Um, the one thing I'll look for specifically is just like, can I find like specific edges? And I'll always start, like, if I don't have anywhere else to start, I'll start there, right? Because we know the deer like to travel edges and just make the scouting
Mm-hmm.
easier on yourself, or give yourself like a starting point. The big transition for me, man, was moving, living around Philadelphia where it's a lot of flat stuff, because I'd never really hunted swamp before growing up, and that's a lot of what is around here. A lot of small bodies of water and swampy kind of, small parcels in between housing developments and stuff like that. And so that was all brand new to me, because I was more used to Western PA where I grew up, where it was all ridges and, hill country essentially. Um, probably more similar to what, out your way. And living here was definitely a curveball. And when I decided just to kind of go all in on the public around here, it was definitely a curveball, and it took me some time to try to figure out how to even scout it, if I'm being honest, and so that's kind of, I just start where there's edges and go from there and work my way from that point forward. So
yeah, and I have no experience in the swamp game, and yeah, I definitely would get turned inside out. It'd be starting from zero essentially. If you put me in that kind of habitat, I understand the process, but think of all the experience you have now after a couple seasons of diving in on that stuff, and I got to believe it's like we talked about a lot on this. Comes with experience. It comes with the year-round approach.
Yeah. It's just, there's no substitute for experience. But I'll tell you the one thing that I learned, man, and I'd be curious to see if you've had a similar experience. Two things that have helped me, well, might be more than two. I might have more bullet points like you had earlier. Okay. But it was what I've started noticing, and I didn't notice it until this past trip when I was in Missouri, and I think I was talking to Chad about it. And I said, I was like, what's crazy, man, is that I'm starting to see things now whenever I'm on a new piece or in an area that I've not been before, that I've now hunted enough like different states and different terrain and stuff like that, that I've now built up like analogs, where I don't remember what spot it was in Missouri, but we settled into the spot where we were scouting through, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, this looks exactly like that one thing that I hunted 4 years ago at X, Y, and Z piece of public. It almost lays out exactly the same. You know what I mean? Like, I almost take mental pictures of things that I see, and then when I see it again, I recognize it, and it almost feels like it hunts the same way. Do you ever have those types of experiences?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I definitely take mental notes, or if a piece lays out similar to, or maybe some habitat converges that remind me of a location on a different piece. It could even be the same state to state, Ohio. Like I definitely will take note and key in on what my scouting, what my experience has. If I seem to find bucks or deer in general doing X because of those things in one piece and applying it to another, for sure. That is definitely the piece I hunted in Kentucky looks similar to something I hunt in Ohio, and that it's a little bit different approach than some of the other pieces I hunt in Ohio. I spend, I would say, 60% of my time more of a big woods, big forest stuff, and then 40% of the time in more of a farm country-ish setting.
Right. I think the one thing that I've found too, in this specific instance, was, I'm trying to figure out how to say it, but almost like micro habitats, where there might be a section of this swamp that I've hunted that looks almost like this section of hill country that I'm hunting, just like the specific spot. You know what I mean? Like I've had like those weird experiences where I've started seeing something in a swamp where I've hunted before, but that little 20-acre area where I know that there's a deer, it reminds me so much of this one 10-acre area in hill country where it almost lays out the same. You know what I mean? Where it's like, it might be on top of a ridge, so it feels very flat, like the swampland would feel. You know what I mean? Or something along those lines, where there's a small little rise in a dip where there's the thermals are pulling, or whatever the case is, and I'm having that experience in the swamp, because it's all flat, and you might just get a little dip, and that might be it, And so it's little things like that. And so that to me is like I don't know, it's like, now I'm getting all geeked out, because it's like, it starts to turn into 4D chess. And it's like, now I'm going through like my mental Rolodex, of like, okay, what did I have I seen this before? How did it play out before? And that to me is like when I start to get excited, because then I really feel like I really feel at that point that I'm kind of in the game. You know what I mean? Because now
I've heard you reference the spidey sense. Is that like when you're sitting there on the ground before you pick the tree? Is that what you're getting? Because I've seen this work X, Y, and Z. I'm currently reading the sign in front of me.
I almost get deja vu, where I almost feel like I've been there before. Now I'm getting all like chakras. I'm gonna get out like the crystals and stuff like that. But no, I almost have like deja vu, where it's like, where I feel like I've seen it before, because I hunted something so maybe in like a swamp, and it might be as different as like swamp and big woods, of that much of a difference between each other in terms of terrain and features. But it might be this one little area where it just is so reminiscent of what I'm looking at the moment, that I know how to hunt that spot now. You know what I mean? And it's like, and it will be like a little bit of a spidey sense kind of moment where I almost feel like I've been there before, which is really kind of weird. But anyway, before I get out any more hippy dippy, we'll move on to the next thing.
Fair enough.
So you mentioned trail cameras a couple times, man, and I'm just curious. I'm always interested to see how, guys are using cameras and what their approach is, whether it's in season, out of season, and during the different times of year, and how they're using them and when they're moving them and stuff like that, and what they're picking up from them. So, how are you using trail cameras at different times of the season and the different places that you're hunting?
Sure. And I think I should preface this that, I've only ran trail cams hard, I feel like, for maybe 2 years. And what I mean by hard, I'm talking about, an army of 15 and made them a higher priority.
Right.
I would say prior to that, if I look at, after college, I probably owned anywhere between 3 to 5 cameras. Now I'm, oh shit, I probably have 20, and I hunt, public with a few other guys. So we got an arsenal, probably upper of 30 cameras.
Right.
We'll call it spread across several pieces, but I generally have roughly 8 to 10 cameras on some of my bigger pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not the most knowledgeable, but what I am seeing as far as like how I use them, I'm not so much hung up on some of the summer information that they can portray. I will say that in some of my bigger woods habitat, if it's diverse enough, I find sheds will get summer trail cam pics, and that deer will be there in the fall. I've found that quite a few times on a couple pieces where the habitat allows for it. Some of the other pieces, I think those deer move or migrate. But I would say I get a decent amount out of them. The initial poke around a new piece, they can let you know the caliber that's there. Scrapes, good trails, stuff like that. In fact, I think that's how I found my 2017 buck. He was a 2.5-year-old, I believe. Yeah, he was a 2.5-year-old, but he had survived. And so that picture was late in the year. That trail cam revealed a decent amount of 100 inchers and one mega. And so I was like, you got that many 100 inchers. There's bound to be some, at that time I'm kind of looking for a 130 plus.
Right.
And so they can do exploratory work for you, kind of a traditional. Right now, I'm kind of big on, deploying them in season. And from everything I gathered in the last 2 years, the scrape game in the big woods has been a learning point for me as far as a daylight movement and what those bucks are doing from the 15th of October to mid-November. I was shocked at how much I've learned in the last 2 years.
Yeah,
running those cameras on scrapes. Dude?
Go ahead.
I only had, I think going into season, I was running 18 cameras, and I think I only had 2 bucks, 130 plus. Once season got rolling, I found quite a few more of that, and not quite a few more, just a few more. But sometimes it's shocking at how many. I can find a decent amount of Pope and Youngest, but to find the 130 pluses, I got to do a lot more digging, it seems.
Right. I'm curious, man. In the big woods, are you finding? My experience has been, and I'm just curious if you've had a similar experience, that a lot of the traveling that I'm seeing, and this comes from, my buddy Chad, owns Exodus Outdoor Gear. We ton of cameras we have in the big woods, and I've learned this from him, and then I've observed it. Is that we see a lot of deer not necessarily using like the primary terrain features, but using more, benches and stuff like that. So what I mean by that is when you look at a map, or most people will look at a map and they'll see a saddle and they'll be like, man, that's got to be funneling deer, right? Like it's a saddle. It's between point A and point B. Potentially deer are hitting it. We'll hang a camera in a saddle with a scrape and get a handful of pictures, maybe, right? And usually not anything of size or of maturity. We find a scrape on a bench, and it'll blow your mind, and it'll just be packed full of deer. And we've found a few places like that where we get consistent daylight activity and daylight movement of bucks of all age structure and caliber, hitting these specific scrapes that are around benches versus ones that you would think would be in high traffic areas of saddles. Have you kind of seen something similar?
Yeah, I'll say two things there. One, I'm not a huge saddle guy.
Hmm.
Um, I just, saddles are cool, but like I've never seen a ton of deer. I've never seen, I don't think a lot of big bucks use saddles.
Hmm.
I have my best success on like when I can combine features
Hmm.
where maybe I've got a hogback or like a hogback. Some people call them different things, but like you got a big ridge and then there's like an erosion cut that kind of gives out maybe halfway up or maybe a third the way up or maybe 2/3 the way up.
Hmm.
I really like the tops of those. I like little, like you said, um, little benches with military crests. I like you said, but I need two or three things. I feel like for me to want to hunt that area where I've got a slight hogback with maybe some better habitat
Hmm.
and a point nearby. I like three or four things, and generally one of those has got to be habitat, whether it be cover, um, age structure. I like cuts.
Hmm.
So yeah, like I need I like to have two to three things, combining features
Yep.
for a scrape to be good. For me to hunt it or throw a camera on it, because like you said, saddles, man, I you can take those away from my arsenal. I'm not terribly concerned with them.
Right. Yeah. And that's one of the things too, is because they're so obvious. If you're hunting a place that does have any type of significant pressure, that's the first place people are going to go. Right.
Yeah,
I've never found a really defined saddle on a map and walked to it and didn't see a tree stand already there.
yeah, or the very best pinch on a big ridge system. I feel like some of them are almost like the second and third little cuts or points that pinch stuff down that's not as obvious on a map, that maybe you can just see a slight bump, but until you put boots to ground, you realize that it does actually funnel some good deer movement.
Right. Now, what about out of state, man? Are you using cameras any different out of state, or do you just not even rely on them when you're hunting somewhere else?
Yeah, I during like right now I've got some cams deployed in Kentucky, but I do I have any in Illinois? I don't have any in Illinois, and like when I punched my Ohio tag and was starting to hunt out of state this year, it was just like, nah, I'm looking for a 120-ish to 130-ish. I'm not terribly concerned. I'll just rely on my in-season scouting to
Right.
and my current hunting to figure out what's going on. Um,
Yeah.
I would definitely use them, deploy them if I had 4 or 5 at the house.
Right.
I should start using them more. Maybe that's a weak point.
Right. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't rely on them. I mean, I didn't rely on them at all in Missouri this year because you can't you can't use them on
Yeah.
MDC ground. So didn't use them at all. But I have used them, whether I was in Ohio or Iowa or whatever the case is. And what I started doing more so than anything was using a cell camera, putting it on a scrape, not because I'm going to hunt that scrape, because I just want to know if that area is still active or not. And it helped me cut down on burning hunts and burning scouting time in an area that just, especially during the rut, and this would be more specifically for the rut.
Mhm.
That way I'm not spending time scouting or hunting an area where the does have gone cold or they're in lockdown or whatever the case is, or the scrapes have gone cold in that area. It just was more of a tool to tell me that, okay, I can not pay attention to this section. I need to prioritize some other areas. That's really kind of how I've used them out of state.
Yeah. And my thing too, like with a trail cam pick, is kind of, I don't know, not talked about enough. I know you're kind of a positive mindset, or how does the mental side really affect your bow hunting? Did you get a picture of some good bucks or one good buck?
Hmm.
Like that's like motivation.
Oh
That's
yeah.
like, sparks the fire to keep hunting hard, to maybe you hunt those farther back spots, or you get up 10-15 minutes earlier to get into the woods, because there's proof of life that a good one's there. Even
Right.
if it's not the buck, you're not going to kill maybe that necessarily buck, but this piece has some good bucks. Like I'm fired up. Like that
Yeah.
does a lot.
Oh, it totally does, man. There was one spot that I hunted specifically this year, with two spots that I had this year that I had earlier in the year. I had really good deer, especially for PA on camera. Um, and the one just kind of disappeared and I could never relocate him. I spent time all over that piece, a couple of different times trying to locate him. I just couldn't find any of his sign, like nothing, no tracks. Like it was just, he disappeared. And then there was
Mhm.
another piece that I had some good deer on that I knew of in the summer, and then I just hadn't seen them in a while. And there was a big deer that I found in a bean field that I glassed up, and I ended up doing some really late summer scouting because I found him super late. And it was one of those really aggressive type of moments where I knew he was probably going to transition because my season comes in around September 19th. And I knew he was going to transition soon after that if he hadn't already transitioned when the season opened. So I needed to make hay early if I was going to try to kill him. And he was a hammer. And I ended up scouting like the week before the season opened, and I bumped him out of his bed. So I knew he was around, and that was just like proof of life. Awesome. And then I couldn't find him, but then I had the cell camera that ended up showing me just like two other hammer deer that I thought that I might have had earlier in the year, but before they were fully developed in velvet. So I couldn't really tell how old they were, how big they were potentially going to be. And when
Oh, I'm terrible velvet judger.
yeah, yeah. So when I saw him hit that scrape, like, what was it? October 15th, 18th, something like that. I was like, get out of here. And this is a pain in the ass place to get to where I have to kayak in. I got to load up the boat, like, especially in the morning. It's just that much more time, And
Mm-hmm.
if I'm being completely honest, I don't know how many times I would have hunted that general area had I not had that picture, just because of how much of a pain in the ass it was going to be to get in and out. But having
Yeah.
that picture just gave me the fueled the fire of there's always a chance whenever I'm in there that he's there, And so
Mm-hmm.
I put the time in, and we don't have to relive those specific hunts. But I ended up having one of the shooters come by, and just I botched the opportunity, and he walked. So, but yeah, man, trail cameras. I'm a believer in them. I try not to rely on them as a crutch. I think a lot of folks can do that, and it can hurt your hunt. But if you
Mm-hmm.
use it as a tool as it's intended, I think it can be gold and give you a ton of information.
Yeah, and I've heard a mutual friend, Josh Profit, talk
Mm-hmm.
about when he's out there checking a trail cam. Well, what is he doing the whole time he's walking out there? He's looking for tracks. He's looking for
Scout.
big rubs.
Yep.
So when I've talked to him on a few phone calls, just asking personal questions, because, like I said, rewind time 2 years ago, I was like, man, I think trail cams are a hole in my game, and so that was a good guy to call, if you will.
Yeah.
And we talked about that, and he's like, yeah, when I'm checking 3 or 4 cams, think about it. I got in 2 miles of scouting.
Mm-hmm.
You're walking by stuff browsed on, you're checking for tracks, new scrapes. I mean,
Yep.
to me, that's a good combo to think about when you're doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Man, since we're on the topic of gear, I know you and I both like gear. I know we both like DIYing things and things like that. So I'm always curious, especially as fellow and brother DIYers and gear freaks. What are your must haves in the timber with you? What are some of your like favorite pieces of gear that you must have?
Ooh,
Yeah, I know
okay.
this is always tough for us gearheads, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the the videographer in me, the filming hunts thing. I love the pocket arm for its packability and its one and done setup. That has changed my. It's been a good ad for a pain in the ass factor of solo filming.
Right.
I'm trying to think of other gear items that are must have. Um, I I really like my. I did a video on this. If it's a rut hunt, obviously if you got whatever layer system, but I am an athletic boot guy, and so I actually cover my toes with an external sock, and that has allowed me to stay in the timber much longer. Those have got to be in there for late season hunts.
Mm-hmm.
Neck gaiters are key. You lose
Oh,
a lot
yeah.
of heat through your neck that people don't really realize.
Yep.
And that's like a weak spot of mine. What other gear item do I gotta have? In the mobile game, I gotta have some sort of aider.
Yeah.
Some sort of climbing aider or movable aider, whatever you want to do. I'm toying with the idea of going back to a some sort of climbable aider. I love the cable aiders, ran those this year, but what your video, the G2 Outdoorsman, Parker, some of these guys are going just 3 sticks because it's kind of nice to put 1 stick on a tree and have 1 on each hip.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just maximizing that climbing effort. with a movable style aider.
Yeah.
And I'm debating on going back to that. So those are just a few of the not like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend my custom gear setup isn't rock star awesome, but those are a couple other sidebar items that maybe the audience wouldn't think about as much.
Right. Yeah. Because I think, you know, your stand or your saddle or whatever is obvious, right? Those are the must haves. It's interesting you mentioned the pocket arm, because mine literally came in the mail today. I'm literally holding it as we're talking and looking at it.
Okay.
I'm a person who attempts to self film every year, and then by about the 5th or 6th hunt, I get pissed off and I stop taking the camera. It's happened every year for like the past couple years, and part of it is what you were saying. It's like I never had like a good solution for actually getting set up in the tree. You know what I mean? And so I was like, I'm gonna get a pocket arm because I feel like that's small enough, light enough that I'll actually take it with me, and it's less cumbersome. Everything's contained. I don't have to set up a bunch of stuff, and that will then entice me to go ahead and continue to take the camera into the woods. So that's one thing that'll be going with me this year. I'm actually changing. I shouldn't say I'm changing. I'm toying with the idea and have built a single stick system. And that's something I might end up completely changing to. I've done a couple like solo, or not solo, but a couple practice climbs just to kind of get familiar with it, get used to it, and see how I like it and stuff like that. And I'm telling you what, man, it's not hard. I put forth just as much effort with my 2-stick system with a 5-step climbinator as I do with this. And the thing that I like about it most is when I'm done hunting, I pack everything in my pack and I rappel out. Man, I am out of the tree in like 2 seconds flat and packed up and ready to roll. Because my biggest fear is this: I'm not scared of heights, but I'm always a little concerned in the evening when I'm climbing out and I can't see. I'm just being honest, right? It's like I'm not a tough guy trying to pretend like I don't have like concerns or whatever. And it's not like I'm scared, but it's always, that's the time when I feel like if I'm going to have an accident, you know, that's when it's going to happen. And so for me, being able to rappel out, not having to climb, always being connected, it kind of removes that factor away. And I'm like, zip, Batman out of the tree, and I'm good to go, packed up and out.
So let me ask this, because I've heard Garrett Perrault on one of his recent podcasts say, you know, he messes with the 1-stick, and he just seems to always come back to some sort of 3-stick method or whatever. Would you ever, like, I can see where the 1-stick is awesome for everything you just listed, but what if you're setting up 60 yards from a bedding area? I just would feel like the extra movement, the potential, it may not be extra noise, you would know more than I, but the extra movement alone scares me with that method, where I actually have watched your video two times this off season or later half of the season when I went back to running just 2 long sticks because like I said, I'm toying with the idea of going back to a movable aider for next year.
Right. Yeah.
Would you ever consider one hunt going single stick and then the next hunt, if you're getting close, maybe bring in your 2-stick method?
Yeah, I could see that I'll have a place in my arsenal for both, for sure. I would envision that my 1-stick would probably be more definitely out of state hunts when I don't know exactly where I might end up. If I know I have a specific location I'm trying to get to, I would probably take the sticks for that, because I know exactly where I'm going. I know what tree I'm probably going to get into, and I know what I need, type of thing. That would probably be the scenario. I think maybe, yeah, there's more movement involved. I think some of it too, because I watched Garrett's video and I saw where he mentioned, in his video that he does use the 1-stick, but he still falls back to 2 or 3 sticks with some aiders or whatever. I think some of it's just comfortability, because I know Carl Casus, like, he basically just climbs with a 1-stick all the time. That's his method of climbing wholesale. And there's plenty of guys out there that are doing just completely SRT and 1-sticking, and that's it. I think it's like anything, man. I think, you have plenty of people out there that'll say, I can't believe you hunted in a saddle, because how do you stay still whenever you're in a saddle, whenever you're hunting close to a bed? I mean, if you want to be still and you want to be smooth and you want to be quiet, it's like anything else, just take your time. Same thing with setting up a stand, right? I mean, plenty of people be like, oh, why would you try to set up a stand close to a bed? You got to do all that moving You just set up a stand or, whatever the case is. The reality is if you do it enough and you have a system down, you can make it really, really quiet and you can make it really, really smooth. And I think it's the same with one sticking.
Okay.
But, I've done a couple, trial climbs, so I'm not an expert at it. We'll see. The proof will be in the pudding. I'll do some hunts this year, and suss it out. But that's kind of my thought process, at least.
Right. And obviously with you being like kind of you talked to this year about wanting to improve that ground game, do more ground hunting with one stick,
Yep.
you may not feel like, oh, I have to get in a tree.
There's a lot of that to it, man. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
There's part of it is just, I don't like to carry stuff. I'm not a big guy. I'm only like 5'9". And people will always say, well, instead of shaving pounds, or weight on your gear, why don't you just lift more weights? I'm like, man, I work out every morning. Like, I'm good to go. Like, I'm in shape. It's not about the weight. I can carry whatever weight I need to carry. It's more about the bulk and the profile. I'm not a big dude, so me carrying a bunch of stuff, it's really cumbersome for me just because of my body size, right? And so the less stuff I need to carry, the better, the more inclined I'll be to get down and move because I have less stuff to pack up. If I see something happen 60 yards from me and I need to make a move and all I need to do is zip out of the tree and move, then I'm doing it. But if I got to tear a bunch of stuff down, then I kind of think twice about, and I'm just being honest with my own personal psychology, right? Like, I shouldn't be lazy about it and I should just make the move regardless, but that would be untrue. I'm thinking about all the things I need to do to make that move, and so the ground game also, the less stuff I'm carrying, the more inclined I'll be to just, if the ground game is where it's at, then that's where it's at. I don't have a bunch of stuff with me.
So yeah, exactly. Maybe that let's get a little hippie here. Maybe your hunter skills way back in the caveman days is more for the ground game,
Right. Yeah.
So maybe Clint's perfect percentage over a course of a deer season is a little more percentage on the ground game attack, and that single stick puts a few more percentage points because you're not afraid to be on the ground a little more.
I would be lying if I said there wasn't some truth to that. There's definitely some truth to that, where it's, there's certain setups where it's like I've definitely set up in a tree because I had the stuff with me as opposed to just staying on the ground. And truthfully, if I were on the ground and I needed to move, I just would move the 60 yards I need to move, So there's definitely some of that, but a lot of it's driven by the fact that I do a lot of out of state hunting and I don't know what tree I'm going to be in. And sometimes I need to be higher than I was, than the gear I have will allow me to get, and
sure.
And so that I've run into that a couple times. Or this year I got into this one tree that was it just sucked. Like, there was just so many branches and stuff. And like the place I needed to get to, it was clear, but I had so much crap to try to climb through and set sticks in between, like on my way through it. It was miserable. And I was like, man, if I just had a one stick, I would have just used all the branches to climb what I needed to climb. And then one stick where it was clean. You know what I mean?
Nice. Yeah.
Cause on the way out, it didn't matter. I could just rappel out, but I needed the sticks to get down, so, But anyway, man, so before we get going, dude, I know I've kept you here for a little while. I want to hear, I would like for you, if you still have time, to walk me through your hunt from this year, man, because you had a little bit of you had a challenge, right? Had to kind of dust yourself off and then come back with a vengeance. So I'd love to hear about that hunt if you have some time.
So I think you mean my 2019 season.
Was it your 2019 season?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I missed the buck in the. Yeah, I can paint that picture. That was definitely the redemption second chance buck.
Right. Yeah, I want to hear about that one because I was watching that video the other day. Because that was the video, right?
That's the one. Yeah, I haven't put out my 2020 film yet. I'm literally just starting to build that one. But yeah, so 2019, Big Woods Habitat. I'm hunting a deer I have his match set off of, and November 2nd, coldest day of the year so far. A lot of big bucks actually died that day across the Midwest. But literally 30 minutes into daylight, here comes a pretty good buck. Definitely the biggest buck I had seen in a while. Comes in, he sticks his head in a scrape. Angling towards me-ish, And after he gets done with the scrape, he takes 2 steps like he's going to come to like 16 yards, like no brainer, slam dunk. And then he makes a hard right and goes down a trail at 28 yards. And I have a bunch of beech trees to my left, like the window is closing. And unfortunately, I didn't stop him. I think that was maybe a mistake there. And I missed this deer low. I thought I actually hit him just based on how he reacted, because he ran about 15 yards and stopped and stared and kind of like, I don't know if he flicked his leg or I definitely remember I thought I'd hit him. And so I actually ended up trying to hit him with a second arrow that did connect. Anyways, we back out, review footage. My buddy Dave comes down. We do the whole leave him for eight hours and do a little blood trailing with no good results there. And that's November 2nd. I come back the next day, November 3rd, which, you know, that's a good day to be in the woods hunting deer. And I do my due diligence to make sure the buzzards aren't out there. I grid search a few areas. No luck there. At this point, I'm a little defeated, actually a lot of it defeated, because you only get so many opportunities at a shooter.
Right.
Don't care who you are. It's just, it's not a high likelihood for me to get a lot of opportunities in the season at a shooter. So I have to go to work because I'm an accountant for the first couple of days of November, and that's just eating me alive, not getting out, getting back in the saddle, if you will, because I've heard so many people talk about the best thing you can do after a miss is get back out there and even just shoot a doe. But
right.
I couldn't even get back out and bow hunt, let alone, create an opportunity. End up going through all my vacation days of the rut. I think that was like 8-ish days in a row. I am sitting there freezing my nuts off. It's like 20 degrees for the high that day. And at noon, I see a good buck come on this ridge system. I'm sitting in a pinch. I have good buck tracks actually in the snow. The snow was only 24 hours old. And, I got good rubs on the tree. He's at like 80-ish yards. I'm like, he's coming. This is the best pinch in the area. He's like, this deer is coming. I'm getting a shot. He ends up working to about 60 and then goes like this odd trail system around this down log and up and over. And I'm like, okay, that was odd. Sit the rest of the day, don't see any more deer. I go in there the next day, and what I told myself, I was going to kind of loop in there a little different, just based on where he came from. I thought, well, let me not try and bump him. I'm going to access a little different. And I saw the log that he like went below. He went below like a fallen log on this hillside. I said, I'm gonna come up that pinch, or I'm gonna come up this like bluffy edge, and I should be right by that down log. And sure enough, I picked my headlamp up in the dark, and I've got that down log. There was actually a tack in the tree that I decided to hunt in. I said that was a good sign, because somebody back in the 90s or 2000s said this was a good tree to be in.
I love that.
Yeah, I was like, I think that's a sign.
Right.
So I climb up there, and I see a small buck, a couple does, and actually the solo doe come back through, hit 2 scrapes, and work away from me. And at 9:30-ish, I turn around and I just see a frame. And I'm like, that's got to be him. And I throw the camera to the down log area where he pinched through the day before. And he comes through, and right about as he catches my boot track, he kind of hunches, and the arrow is en route at this point.
Nice.
Chop felt good. It sounded good, kind of like that poppy noise that generally means you did what you should. He jumps a crack, runs about 80 yards, pauses, and I'm like, he's falling. He's got to fall. And then he trots off down the hill out of sight, and I'm like, oh, no, this can't happen again. I can't miss 2 deer.
Right. I remember when I was watching this, and I thought the same thing, because like I saw... the first shot looked great, or the shot looked great, right? And I was like, oh, that deer's going down. And when he stopped, I was like, oh, he's going to do the wobble and fall over. This is going to be great footage. I was thinking for you, I was like, it's going to be awesome footage. You're going to watch him fall. And then I saw him trot off, and I was like, I thought the same thing. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, how does that deer still standing?
Well, did you see he jumped that like ravine, like erosion crack right there of like, I mean, this is like, I don't know how he climbed back up. Well,
I thought for sure when he landed
a lot of energy.
Well, that's what I thought. And I was like, just waiting to see like him basically hit the other side and just crumple. You know what I mean? Like that's what I expect whenever he was getting ready to jump, and I was like, oh, he's just going to hit the other side and just eat it, and that's going to be it. And then I was like, get out of here.
Yeah. So I did not feel great at this point. And this is a place I don't have cell signal. So that kind of, mentally you're just stuck there with your own thoughts.
Yeah.
I climb down, breakdown process takes about 20 minutes. So I sit in the tree for about half hour breakdown. So it's an hour after the shot. And we had snow on the ground that morning-ish. And so I didn't have the best blood for about 70 yards. And then it started getting better. And I get to where in the film, you lose sight of him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a downhill. And I walk about 30, 40 yards and I can see a deer down at the bottom. I glass it and make sure. And by the time I get down there, I should back up too. Cause after I shot the deer, I kind of second guessed, did I just shoot a 110-inch 8-point or did I shoot the big buck I'd seen the day before?
That's awesome.
Because I literally thought, man, did I just shoot a 110-8? Because I'd passed 2 or 3 of those this year or that year.
Right.
And I was like, no, that was the big buck from the day before, the bladed G2. And then I do walk up on him and it is the bladed G2. And at that point, dude, I just let loose, man.
Dude, you lost your mind.
That's what it's all about.
I loved it, dude. You get so excited. I was watching the video and I was getting excited for you, even though I wasn't there. I didn't know the story. Oh, I mean, I watched the video, so I knew kind of the story. But yeah,
right.
But you were jacked up, man. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that. So I ended up shooting that deer actually about 200-ish yards, maybe 100, somewhere around 100, 200 yards from where I missed the other buck.
Right.
That area was just hot that year. But yeah, it was.
What was it about that spot?
9.
What was the reason, or the rationale for the setup? Like what led you there?
So I had a match set off a buck not seen in that video.
Mm-hmm.
That buck scored with roughly a 17-inch spread the year before 138. And so he was back in there year 2. I called this deer Apple Picker, who I was chasing, because I took my wife apple picking the day he daylighted, that same year. So he that's his name. I don't think he's alive anymore, but he could have been 50s.
Right. Okay.
He was definitely high 40s, and that's who I was in there after. And yeah, that area was hot that year. It has some good stuff going on. I think there's an early cut. There's some tough access.
There you go. How old's that cut?
It's under 5.
No, yeah, there you go. That's awesome.
But I think it's in the sweet spot.
Right.
I don't want to. As crazy as it sounds, Clint, I don't want to say much more, but there's 2 other things in that area that it's got going for it.
Gotcha.
But we get a lot of pressure now.
Yeah.
But
say no more, my friend.
Yes. No, you laugh, man. There was a guy this year that recognized a dead cedar behind Dave in one of our videos.
Oh no, I hear you, man.
He goes, literally, I hunt that same tree.
Right. Yeah. No, it's
yeah. So there are 2 or 3 other things in there, but I think it's got a good mix of habitat. I think it's got some good mix on the private from what I can see from the lines.
Right.
And access is difficult. Well, not difficult, but it's uphill, and where I was up, down, and back up again. So once you put 2 hills between you and a road, that tends to help.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, that was a killer buck, man. I won't ask you about this year's, because we'll wait for that film to come out, and maybe we'll just have to do a part 2 of this and do another chat if you're game, and we'll talk about that hunt. Sound good?
Oh yeah, man. Like Clint, I put you. I did a YouTube video of top kind of public land DIY crowds. I really feel like you hit your stride here in the last couple of years of catering to a similar crowd that the Whitetail Experience targets. So man, I like what you're doing, and keep it up, man.
Appreciate it, man. And I appreciate you coming on, dude. I feel like we got to do a scout or something together one of these days. I feel like Public Land Brothers need to kind of stick together, and we need to spend some time together. So we'll try to make that happen here at some point, one of these off seasons. But before I let you go, man, let people out there that are listening know where they can find out more about you and where they can find out more about the Whitetail Experience.
Yeah. I would just look us up on YouTube. I try to put out a variety of videos there. related to buck films, to public land hunting, maybe like little tip mobile hunting stuff. That's definitely there. And then obviously the general social platforms, Instagram and Facebook, the Whitetail Experience there. That's about it. We do have a very small podcast, but it's USB mic recorded, and we just very focused on kind of our target consumer, but that's out there too if you're a podcast listener.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, brother. Everyone out there listening, be sure to give these guys a check. Check them out on YouTube. Give them a subscribe. Check out their videos. Check out their podcast. Man, I will be talking to you soon, brother. Good luck in all your off-season scouting, and enjoy that new family, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. If you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, and Maven Optics. And until next time, we'll see y'all.